Welcome to the Forum on WSMI. I'm your host, Sean Balent. This weekend we're remembering a legend. Former Illinois Governor Jim Edgar, who recently lost his battle with pancreatic cancer. And we're hearing from former Congressman Rodney Davis, who reflects on Jim Edgar the politician and Jim Edgar the man. Time to chat with Rodney Davis on WSMI. We're looking at the Governor Edgar era, and we're roughly the same age. What impression did he leave upon you as someone who would get into politics and certainly worked under the tutelage of former Congressman Shimkus? What impact did he have on you growing up?
Well, Governor Edgar got elected governor while I was in college, and it really was the first campaign that I had gotten active in. I was working in college off and on just as a volunteer for former Senator Doc Davidson down in the Taylorville area. And I got to watch the results come in, both for Doc, who won a close race that time, and then also Governor Edgar. So when I got out of college and began working in state government, I got to watch Governor Edgar, come in and say, I want to hold the line on issue A and issue B, and in the end found a way to get to a principal compromise. This is why a guy who was steadfast in doing what he believed was right fiscally he was able to also work with Democrats who ran the House and the Senate, frankly with the Republican minority leaders in the House and the Senate that eventually became majority leaders or presidents of the Senate too.
It seems like that style just was the right style at the right time. I mean, Jim Thompson had a larger-than-life personality and filled the room in many ways, and big towering presence, what have you. It's kind of like baseball going back to fundamentals. Just a get-down-to-business attitude.
It certainly was. I didn't really work in politics, wasn't engaged in politics under Governor Thompson. So Edgar was the first example of what a governor should do to me as I was learning the ropes in state government. But Governor Edgar was just that guy who won a close race in 1990, barely beat Neil Hartigan. Many expected Hartigan to win, but Edgar did surprisingly well, pulled it off. Continued the Republicans dominating the Illinois governorship that continued from when I was 7 years old, when I moved to Illinois, until I was 32, when the first Democratic governor was elected in my time in Illinois. But Governor Edgar was so effective during his first 4 years that he was able to help other Republicans in 1994 be able to sweep every statewide office and sweep into the majority in the House and the Senate, which has been the only time in my lifetime that Republicans have actually controlled the Illinois House and the Illinois Senate and the governor's mansion. A lot of that had to do with Governor Edgar being so effective in that first term to where he just dominated, as did Republicans in 1994.
I think of that Edgar Hartigan race, and boy, it just seems like something you'd like to bottle up because it was about the issues. It wasn't about, we didn't have campaign ads like, here's Neil Hartigan with someone dressed as the devil, and here's Jim Edgar with a picture of something that really had nothing to do with how he ran the office. It was, in terms of today with some of the crazy ads, third-party ads and everything else, it was just good, pure discussion about issues.
It certainly was, but I think that was indicative, too, of the candidate he ran against, in Comptroller Dawn Clark Netsch. Netsch was, going to run her pool table ad like she did, and Edgar was going to stick to the basics. It didn't mean they didn't criticize the record or the plans of the other candidate, but because there wasn't that outside influence that you see in campaigns now, they were responsible for their own messaging, and they were held accountable for that messaging by members of the news media and by the public also. So it was a message of, here's what we're going to do for Illinois. And Governor Edgar left office after that second term with 70% plus approval rating. I mean, this is a guy who still maintained such popularity. And frankly, after his passing, I think his popularity is only going to grow because he was a kind that doesn't operate in politics as much anymore.
And a thing that certainly stood out, he didn't wait for approval, didn't do any polling. If he believed in something, he went with it.
He certainly did. And ironically, as his team will tell you, the polling numbers usually matched his intuition. And then even afterwards, when I started running for Congress in 2012, Governor Edgar was one of my first phone calls. And he told me, he said, I always thought you would have the best shot to win this race because you were a former staffer like he was. And he said, you kind of followed a similar political upbringing that I did. And he became a great mentor to me during that very close race. I would call him at times when, the negative ads were overbearing. He'd just tell me, just hang in there. You're doing the right thing. Just, stick to your gut and make the decisions that you think are best and go out and win this thing. And we maintained that relationship as I served, even when he was vociferously not supportive of even President Trump during his first term. I would remember he and I would share phone calls, and he would tell me what his thoughts were, and we would laugh, we would joke, and we would agree and disagree on things. And that's what made Governor Edgar great. He didn't base his friendship and his mentorship on agreeing with somebody 100% of the time. He and I did not agree on his lack of support and my support for President Trump. But we were still able to talk about things that we could do together and still remain good friends.
What can we get a Jim Edgar back? Do you think we can have, with the politics of today and the viral stuff, how would Jim Edgar hold up in today's environment? And can we have another Jim Edgar?
Well, I think Governor Edgar would tell you he'd have a tough time in the Republican primary. I mean, look, my district changed, so I had a tough time in a Republican primary because, I followed the Governor Edgar form of governing. You actually figure out where you can work with the other side, and you get 75 to 80% of what you want. Then you go back and fight, only to have to solve 20 to 25% of your problems. Governor Edgar, yes, can get elected. All you got to do is look around the country, and you can see people like Spencer Cox getting elected in Utah and others. But it is more polarizing. And I do believe that the American electorate is going to value bipartisanship in governing again, because it's been cyclical in the past. We've had times in our nation's history where people have valued the partisanship. They valued the polarization. And now here we are at a time where we're seeing polarization rise. We're seeing, unfortunately, political assassinations like the one that the world just witnessed with Charlie Kirk last week. But there's going to come a time where the American electorate's going to say enough's enough, and they're going to value a person who governs like Governor Edgar. So, yes, somebody like Governor Edgar will get elected again. And, yes, a Republican governor will get elected again in Illinois.
Well, Congressman Rodney Davis, thanks again. Always good to chat with you, and all the best, as obviously you're still keeping busy and traveling and keeping the airports going.
I certainly am. And, I will say one last thing about Governor Edgar. It was very touching when, after I had to dodge bullets on a baseball field with my friends, that he was one of the calls I got a few days later just to check in, to see how I was doing. And he maintained that mentorship for me as I continued to serve, too. Just a good guy and a great friend. And it's Illinois' loss, but my thoughts and prayers go out to Brenda and his family and all those who knew him even better.
And I'll throw in one more thing. I'm infamous for that, as you know. The dignity with which he left us. When the trademark hair was gone with his cancer treatment, and knowing what he faced,
knowing that the final curtain was coming. And every time he turned out in public, nothing but dignity. I just saw some of the interviews, and boy, his inner strength really shined at the end.
You know, Jim Edgar's inner strength shined everywhere he went. No matter what the issue was he was facing, he didn't change who he was and how he discussed his ideas with the public. You know, it was tragic to see him fight the pancreatic cancer the way he did, but you're right, Sean. The public stance he did while he was fighting it, you know, hopefully is encouragement to others who have to go through the same or similar fights against a deadly disease.
Well, thanks for joining us for another edition of the Forum on WSMI. We'll see you again next weekend for Around Montgomery County. I'm your host, Sean Billette, saying so long until next weekend.